Hello guys, it's me, the Kitty Republic, your favorite American Democratic Socialist. In today's video, I'm going to be explaining why, despite China having the word peoples and being ruled by a party that calls itself communist, and even though it's basically an oxymoron because there's no such thing as a communist country, because communism is a stateless, classless, moneyless society where all are equal, and China is everything except that. And even though China is ruled by an emperor who calls himself a Marxist, even though he hasn't done anything with his power to actually implement Marxism or a dictatorship of the proletariat or anything revolutionary, I'm going to be explaining why China is not a socialist country, and what China actually is quite simple. China is a one-party, centralized police state with a social democratic economic system that is, socially speaking, conservative. China is a republic, but it's not a democracy. The people in China vote, but only on the local level, not the national level. And in China, you can criticize the local government, but not the national one. When I say vote on a local level, I mean you could only vote for people who are loyal to the CCP and are approved by the party. There are more than one political party in China, but they aren't real political parties, and they're all in submission to the main CCP. They don't compete with the main party for democratic power. The Chinese Communist Party has way too much power. But the reason why I mention this is because an actual socialist state has to be democratic if it actually wants to be a dictatorship of the proletariat. And China is a complete bureaucracy. China has a worse system than the US, and the US is not perfect. We established that China is not democratic for those reasons. But what are the things that actually make a state socialist? What is socialism, for crying out loud? Well, socialism is this. Socialism encompasses a broad spectrum of social economic systems that are characterized by the social ownership of the means of production. According to Marxist theory, socialism represents the transitional phase between capitalism and communism. Unlike communism, where the state is abolished, socialism retains a government or state apparatus. Social ownership of the means of production refers to a system in which facilities, resources, and infrastructure used in the production of goods and services are owned collectively by the employed population. The ownership extends to physical assets such as factories, machineries, tools, and raw materials. A simplified analogy would be likened to socialism to unions on steroids. It's important to note that socialism differs from social democracy. While living under a social democratic nation provides certain benefits, these benefits are significantly amplified under socialism. Socialism isn't just social ownership over the means of production. Socialism is also the abolition of private property, democratically planned economy, a classless society, and exploration. Besides that, China is an undemocratic country. While it has democracy at the local level, but it has it heavily controlled by the Chinese Communist Party, and it barely is democratic, meaning that it's non-existent. China does not meet the definition of socialism, and considering that as of right now it's an authoritarian social democracy, economically social democracy China is not pro-gay rights or anything like Germany. China has state-owned enterprises and a significant presence of private property and a market economy, which is not socialist. And Marx's definition of socialism goes against the idea of the market because it's capitalistic in nature. Additionally, China's economic system is not democratically planned or a classless society. The Chinese Communist Party retains significant control over the government and the economy, and there is clear social hierarchy with a distinct classes, and China has their own bourgeoisie essentially. China is only considered quote-unquote socialist because it calls itself that in its own constitution and government. but it does not at all adhere to Marxism. And China will never be a socialist country unless a revolution happens in China, which I don't know if it will happen, since the largest left-wing opposition to the Chinese Communist Party is Maoist, instead of actual socialism, aka democratic socialism, where the workers own the means of production instead of the state. But then that begs the question, was China actually socialist under Mao Zedong? Because the reason why China is a social democracy instead of actually trying to be Marxist-Leninist, which doesn't exist, it's just the same thing as Stalinism. Well, no, China was not socialist under Mao Zedong either. Mao Zedong's China put the means of production under state control, not under workers' control. Of course, I support the idea of nationalizing some industries, but I do not agree with doing that with everything, because then that wouldn't actually be socialism, which is worker control over the means of production, not the state. Workers should have the power and the ones who own the means of production. The state is just there to make sure that socialism actually happens and doesn't devolve back into capitalism. Mao Zedong's China did not fully abolish private property, and there were elements of private ownership and entrepreneurship in certain periods and sectors of the economy. Private ownership is capitalism, by the way. Mao Zedong didn't eliminate classes, which I guess I can't be too hard on him when it comes to that alone, since eliminating classes would take time. China did not have a democratically planned economy. The people who ran the planned economy were party leaders of the Chinese Communist Party, not the workers. So essentially, what I'm saying is that modern day China is an authoritarian social democracy, and China under Mao Zedong was worse because the famines killed millions of people, and China engaged in imperialism by invading Tibet and invading Vietnam. China might have been closer to socialism in ancient times, but China under Mao Zedong took power, and since then has never been a socialist country. Unless a revolution in China happens tomorrow, who knows? But it is possible for there to be a revolution in China, since countries like France or Russia have been under authoritarian rule for like hundreds of years, and they had revolution. The Russian Revolution failed with the establishment of the USSR, and that modern Russia is basically a fascist state. But I think it's more realistic for Russia to have a revolution than it is for China, considering how strong the police state is in China. But anyways, I have been the Kitty Republic. If you like what you see, make sure to subscribe and like the video, and that would be all. Peace.